Hi, good evening, everyone. I have prepared a topic on the right way to build your brand from Harvard Business Review magazine, and I hope you are going to enjoy it. Let me switch back to it. The topic is the right way to build your brand, and it is based on HBR, written by Roger L. Martin, Jan Schwartz, and Mimi Turner. What is brand? The strong brands are critical assets. We all would agree with this. And the best campaigns create a more memorable, valuable, and deliverable promise to customers. Almost more than a century ago, the merchant John Wanamaker complained that half of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I do not know which half. Because the proponents of advertising have always struggled to prove that the money is well spent, that indictment has long helped financial executives justify cutting at budgets, as no less an authority than Jim Stenigal, a former chief marketing officer at Procter and Gamble, has noted the struggle continues. Although huge resources go towards testing advertising copy and measuring its effectiveness. The battle has become tougher with the advent of online advertising, which is more prevalent nowadays, and performance marketing. That is spending to capture and convert potential demand that has already arrived at the top of a brand's sales funnel. In other words, the advertiser pays for clicks. However, in what is now called brand advertising, it is designed to help establish awareness for a brand, a product, or a service to strengthen identity and increase customer loyalty, which is the link between advertising spending and positive financial outcomes. The result is that would-be brand builders face the dual of challenge of Wanamaker's local standing critique and the rise of performance marketing as a perceived legitimate alternative. The CEO of an iconic fashion clothing brand mentioned that I'm finding it impossible in my own organization, which notionally I control, to protect brand advertising against performance advertising spending. So we finally have an answer for Vanamakers and a coherent rationale for investment in brand building. We drew on a large database supplied by the Word Advertising Research Council WARC to empirically identify what types of brand advertising are most effective, both for attracting new customers and for converting them into loyal repeaters. Repeat customers is what is the testimony of the money spent on marketing as such. As we will explain, the key to successful brand building is a clear and specific promise to the customer that can be demonstrably fulfilled. Advertising that makes such a promise almost always results in better performance than advertising that does not, even if the latter creates greater name awareness. And a well designed customer promise not only leads directly to sales, but also provides an effective framework on which to organize a company's activities. Now, let's begin explaining what we mean by a promise to customer. Let's decode this one by one. The brand promise framework. If you see on the right side of yours, you see Rudy's Liquors, Steakhouse, Colony Motel, etc. So, promises. When one person makes a promise to another, it creates a relationship between the two. If the pledge is fulfilled, it builds trust, resulting in a valuable connection. Research shows conclusively that making a promise and then delivering on it has a greater positive impact on the recipient than simply doing a favor or a service for that person. Let's consider these three promises for competitors in the same industry. LS states you are in good hands. Nationwide is on your side, and Geeko's 15 minutes could save you 15%. Only Geekos is a direct and verifiable. It promises that just 15 minutes of your time can save your 15% over your current insurance. And that kind of example, that kind of thing, that creates a connection. And if you take the 15 minutes and save 15%, the company has built trust. Allstate and Nationwide imply promises, but essentially about themselves rather than the customer. Our hands are good, and we are on your side. Their promises are not verifiable. What does good mean in practice? And how does on your side play out? How do you quantify that? How do you measure that? How do you verify that? And those differences made us wonder, could the success of a brand building campaign be related to the type of promises made? So we all would agree that you know customers respond more favorably to a brand that made the promise more visible and then clearly delivered on a specific promise, and the customer should be in a position to measure the deliverables, measure the delivery of that promise getting delivered. To answer those questions, the team has turned out to has reached to WARC, and WARC's database include more than 24,000 case studies drawn from ad competitions all around the world. The competitions require entrants to explain how their marketing communications have worked, including soft performance metrics such as impact on brand perception and hard measures such as gain in the market share. So we studied the data for more than 2,000 campaigns that had entered competitions from 2018 to 2022. Before looking at any of the performance metrics, we classified the campaigns according to whether they had made an explicit and verifiable promise to customers. About 60%, about 60%, which is 1213 out of 2021 included no such promise, while the remainder 808 did. We then compared the two groups on a variety of metrics. Customers promise, Customer promise campaigns outperformed other campaigns across most measures. For example, on measures of brand perception, brand preference, and purchase intent, 56% of customer promise campaigns versus 38% of others reported improvements. Market penetration increased in 45% of customer promise campaigns versus 38% of other languages versus my apologies versus 38% of other campaigns, and market share increased in 27% of customer promise campaigns versus 17% of others. Let me share the data with you. Look at this. That is not to say that other campaigns did not perform well on some measures. They beat customer promise campaigns soundly, which is 55% to 43% on generation of social media buzz, for example. But customer promise campaigns win on the important metrics. WARC ranks campaigns in a hierarchy of six ascending levels of performance. If you can see this graph on the right side, and it has been taken from the World Advertising Research Council, WARC. It says unsuccessful campaigns don't make it into the hierarchy. Non customer promise campaigns outperform customer promise campaigns slightly, which is 51 to 49% on the lowest level. Influential idea. But as the categories become more important, the advantage of CP over non CP campaign grows, with 62% over 38% in commercial triumph and 67% over 33 in enduring icon. Let's understand the power of customer promise. Ad campaigns rooted in making a fulfilling a customer promise may not always generate the most buzz, but they deliver on the dimensions that count. The World Advertising Research Council (WARC) uses these six levels of performance to rate campaigns, which is shown here from least to most commercially successful. We studied WARC's data for more than 2,000 campaigns to compare their results. If you see performance level, criteria number one is influential idea. Criteria is overachieves on campaign metrics. Does the campaign make a promise to the consumer? In influential idea, no is 51% and yes is 49. Similarly, for behavior breakthrough, criteria is changes consumer behavior. Does the campaign make a promise to the consumer? No 43, yes 57. Sales spike. If you see the criteria is leads to short-term growth. Meeting non-meeting is 45%, meeting is 55, and henceforth for brand builder, commercial triumph, and enduring icon. So what does a customer promise involve? And perhaps what is missing which makes the brands fail? We begin by looking at the kinds of promises made in our dataset of 808 customer promise campaigns. The majority of promises fell into three types, and 89% of campaigns made at least one type. Some made more than one. The first is emotional, the second is functional, third is enjoyable to buy, fourth is memorable, fifth is valuable, and last is deliverable. Let's understand one by one. Emotional. Perhaps surprisingly, this was the biggest category, with 35% of the campaigns having made it their primary kind. It involves the emotional benefits a customer will receive from using a product or service. A classic example is MasterCard Priceless campaign. There are some things there are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there is a MasterCard. The promise is that MasterCard will take care of everything involving money, allowing you to focus on your treasured experiences. Another classic is have a Coke and a smile. Have a Coke and a smile, which focused customers on the pleasure associated with drinking a Coke with someone else. And De Beers' famous "A Diamond is Forever." "A Diamond is Forever" has since 1947 promised that the endurance of a diamond confers permanence on the emotions attached to it. So, more recently, Lysol's Protect Like a Mother makes the emotional promise that using the product will make you as protective as fierce mothers in the animal kingdom. Let's understand the functional one. In 32% of our samples, the primary promise was functional. For instance, Snickers, you are not you when you are hungry, promises that customers will be able to operate at full capacity after consuming one of its candy bars. FedEx launched its when it absolutely, positively has to be there overnight campaign in 1978, and the promise was so powerful that it resulted in the criteria of a new verb to FedEx. Part of the campaign's success is that it conveys an emotional promise as well. You don't have to worry because it is FedEx. And the real success of a brand is measured when that brand, when the brand name gets start using as a verb. For example, let's make a trip. Let's make a urgent trip, and we will do BNB. So BNB has also started being using as a verb, and that's when the real success, the real integrity of that brand, the usage of the verb showcase the real integrity of the brand into the life of the people. Moving on to next is enjoyable to buy. A surprisingly large number of companies, 22%, adopted as their primary promise the idea that customers would enjoy the process of purchasing. You should enjoy purchasing. You should enjoy you should enjoy spending that money on that product. A good example is provided by the paint maker Sherwin-Williams, which won the 2022 B2B Grand Prix at Cannes for its campaign based on an artificial intelligence tool that allows customers to create and choose a paint color by using voice to describe it. For example, a turquoise like the sea in the Maldives. For example, designers and architects loved it. The promise that Uber is the smartest way to get around, which focuses heavily on the ease of ordering and paying, is another example. The remaining campaigns fell into three minor categories: value for money, which is 5%, such as Geeko's 15-minute could save you 15%. Second is sustainability, which is 4%, including Tide's Turn to Cold campaign, which promises that its new product is as effective in cold water as regular Tide is in hot, and making amends for prior failures, 2%, with Wells Fargo's Earning Back Your Trust campaign in the wake of its fraudulent account opening scandal being a prime example. So the three categories are value for money, 5%, sustainability, 4%, and making amends for prior failures is 2%. Having determined what kind of promises companies make, we turned to look at what makes the promises attractive to consumers and customers. And we found that successful campaigns share three features, and they are memorability, valuability, and deliverables. What do we understand by memorability? In most cases, they run counter to expectations. Germany-based SIXT has quickly become the fourth largest rental car company in Europe and is the fastest growing in the US market. Its slogan is "Do not rent a car, rent the car." Its promise is that SIXT won't disappoint you by foisting the only available vehicles on you when you arrive for pickup. as often happens to consumers at their companies. You will be given the car you originally choose. Second is valuability. Customers must want what the promise offers. That's more likely if it diverges from a status quo they don't like. SIXT executives realized that consumers or customers willing to hire an expensive car actually cared about the make and model. That was less of an issue for bargain hunters, but they were not XIXT's target market. Of course, other rental companies also offer premium cars, but in order to save cost, they don't always guarantee a specific car, giving SIXT an opportunity to differentiate itself with premium buyers. And the last is deliverable. Part of the value of any customer promise is precisely that it is a guarantee, which requires that the customer is able to determine that the promise was fulfilled. Making a promise involves risks, and SIXT must deliver the car. MasterCard actually needed to take over of everything else. Coke has to be enjoyable, which is why its reputation suffered so much when people did not like the taste of the new Coke. Lysol must protect, Snickers must boost energy, and so on. Our assumption is that most of the 808 customer promise campaigns generally fulfill their company's promises. Otherwise, they would not have had disproportionately had positive effects. But because customer promise has not been an explicit factor in previous surveys, the WARC dataset includes no information about whether the companies making such promises actually fulfill them. Our hypothesis is that we being able to create a sub sample of campaigns that definitely made good on their promises, we would have found that they scored even higher on the performance metrics. Of course, how a customer determines whether the promise has been kept may not be obvious, especially in emotional value campaigns. But it clearly makes sense for companies to figure out exactly how to deliver on their promises. So, marketers always claim that their goal is to make campaign promises memorable, valuable, and deliverable. But as we have seen, their promises are not always about the customer. The premier advertising event of the year is the Super Bowl, when many views may pay more attention to the ads than to the game. And the 2023 Super Bowl was no exception. Most of the ads were feats of creative storytelling packed into a precious few seconds of very expensive airtime. They were memorable and often featured celebrities. The Hellman's mayonnaise ad depicted Brie Larson and John Hamm about to be eaten in a sandwich by Pete Davidson. So, our proposal of the 41 commercials for the 2023 Super Bowl reveals that fewer than a third of them attempted to convey a specific promise of value to be delivered to the customer, a finding close to our results when we broke down the WARC campaigns. What most of those ads were aiming at was to enter the cultural conversation. Advertising's equivalent of trying to be the most popular kid at the party. Only a handful actually made their tagline a memorable, valuable, and deliverable promise to the customer. Farmer's Dog, which promised real food made fresh, delivered, was one. So, in conclusion, we do not have the data to assert that its Super Bowl ad boosted sales for Farmer's Dog more than the other ads did for their companies, but feedback we got on. Our research suggests that it is very likely when we showed our results. So, as we were discussing the functional aspects, in 32% of our samples, the primary promise was functional. For instance, as we discussed, Snickers, you are not you when you are hungry. Promises that customer will be able to, make one major advertiser. For example, its executives decided to review the copy of three successive ad campaigns, a successful one followed by a disappointing one, followed by a successful one once again. Everyone in the room agreed that the company had made an explicit promise in the first and the third, but its executives had been so excited about a new version of the product featured in the second that they had focused the ad on how great it was and neglected to make a promise. The insight that effective brand building is anchored in a promise to the consumer that can do more for a company than just helps it. It invests wisely in advertising. Let me repeat that. The insight that effective brand building is anchored in a promise to the consumer can do more for a company than just help it invest wisely in advertising. The promise can serve as a strategic framework for mobilizing everything a company does. Your promise is your strategy. Today's Today's companies face big challenges stemming from the fragmentation of functions, including product, marketing, sales, customer experience and loyalty, and HR and talent as well. They all tend to operate in silos, often at significant cross purposes. A well conceived customer promise can provide a common objective. That's because creating and executing on a CP customer promise is, in a sense, an act of strategy making, defining where the company will play. For example, SIXT among affluent people who care about cars and how it will win. This provides information for investors how the company will beat its competitors, customers the value the company will bring them, employees the value they are striving to create, the marketing and sales function how the company positions itself, the production function what the operational objective is, and finance what it should be measuring. We think of taking a CP to the market as a cycle with 5 steps. The first step is to understand consumers well enough to know what constitutes memorability and value for them. For example, in SIXT, they understood its consumers well enough to know that they were frustrated by being given a rental car they had not chosen and did not like. It used that understanding to design a CP, customer promise, settling on a very simple but compelling and memorable settlement. Do not rent a car, rent the car. The first half of the tagline is counterintuitive. No, I need a rental car. But the second half makes a specific and deliverable promise. SIXT said, I would be given the car I booked, and I was. Once a company has designed its CP, customer promise, it can issue it publicly and in doing so, commit to it, which SIXT does relentlessly. That it must project that promise to the target audience. If it is not received, it cannot be effective. Finally, it needs to fulfill the CP or the promise will be largely worthless. SIXT unfailingly does so. This cycle provides guidance about the resources the company must dedicate to the various aspects of brand building. How much should it dedicate to understanding customers? How much to designing and issuing a CP? How much how much to projecting it and how much to ensuring that the key aspects of the CP are delivered. As the company repeats the cycle, it learns more about its strategic challenges and how to account for consumer and competitor shifts. In conclusion, the ultimate goal of marketing campaigns should be to go through the CP cycle, customer promise cycle, often enough that your customers stop wondering whether you will make good on your promises or not. Once they assume that you will, they purchase out of habit rather than choice. Tide customers don't question whether the detergent will get their clothes weather and brighter. They just dump it. They just dump it in the shopping cart. Thus, unthinking habit means that they give Tide's competitors no opportunity to prove their own CPs, widening Tide's lead over the competition. The result is an enduring and valuable brand. So when a CMO comes to the XCOM meeting to propose allocating capital to a new campaign, the CEO and the CFO should ask four simple questions. First, is the campaign based on a clear and unambiguous customer promise? Second, were customers' insights used to identify a promise that customers value? Third, is the promise framed in a way that is truly memorable? And fourth, were product, marketing, sales, and customer experience involved to ensure that it will be consistently fulfilled? If any of the answers are negative, the CMO needs to go back to the drawing board. But if they are all positive, the company should absolutely invest in the campaign because those questions capture the secret to brand building. Thank you.